So I was watching TV last night. I occasionally get a chance to sit down, relax when I'm not working 90 hours a week. And there was this story. I like stories about things that have happened, true crime, that kind of thing. Not like the salacious nonsense you get in a true crime novel, but sort of the stuff that they cover on some of the different channels where they talk about actual attacks that have taken place and how the law enforcement agencies involved were able to figure out who done it and so forth and so on. And so the one they were talking about last night was a young girl who was kidnapped by this guy who was notorious for riding around his bicycle around this particular town, and he was a bit crazy. So he didn't have all of his marbles, right? Well, the guy takes her, kidnaps her. She's a young teen in a high school. Kidnaps her, takes her to his place that's in the woods, holds her there for a while. And as the law enforcement agencies have sort of figured out who it is, they've been able to put two and two together, and they've decided it's this guy, and now they're looking for him. And so he's obviously freaked out, and he knows that his time is limited, and so he decides, things are going to pretty much hit the fan, and either he's going to be dead, or she's going to be dead, or they're both going to be dead. And he's running now away from a state police officer who had figured out who he was, and he runs towards a property. And as he's getting onto the property owner sees him, pulls out a 12-gauge shotgun, raises it up, and all of a sudden the guy gets shot, and he collapses, the suspect. Only to find out that it wasn't the guy with the shotgun who shot him. It was actually the state police officer who had been trailing him and shot him actually through the neck with a hand weapon, a handgun. So I don't know what it was. It was back in the 1960s, I think. So it was probably a .357 or .38 or something like that. Now, what's the point? So the point is, other than just telling you a story about some true crime that happened, is to illustrate one of the key components I got out of that story, which is why I watch these kind of things. This guy on the bicycle, again, I don't remember his name, but he was crazy. Let's call him Crazy Joe on the bicycle. And everybody knew him as this guy who rode the bicycle around town. Well, he had followed this girl for 2 months, approximately, everywhere she went, paying attention to her schedule, how she behaved, where she went, when she went, all that kind of thing. And he was able to figure out patterns, and then he was able to kidnap her. So what should that tell you? That's an interesting story, right? So if I can extrapolate any information out of that story, what I extrapolate, what I picked up, the salient point, the most important point is be aware of your surroundings, because guess what? You may not notice the crazy dude on the bicycle that's been stalking you and following you and has been preparing to ambush you. In another video, I talk about surviving ambushes, because most people don't, including people who are well-trained, law enforcement, so on. In the infantry or combat arms and special operations, especially in the United States military, we tell all of our combat arms guys that if you experience an ambush, right, that is, you don't expect the attack then happens and is an overwhelming attack, you rush through the ambush. That is, you get into the fight. You don't run with your back turned so that then they can get a good beat on your back and shoot you in the back or shoot you in the back of the head or something like that. You actually rush through the ambush. You go through the ambush so that you can fight. And so it's funny, circa 2003, 2004, 2005, think back to Iraq, the invasion of Iraq. We're now in Baghdad and Mosul and places like that. And depending on who the commander was, would have a different set of orders based on the extent of damage caused in ambushes. And so some of the guys who were attacking American soldiers, right, the insurgents, if you will, terrorists, if you will, these guys had figured out certain units would respond back in kind and certain units would not. So a good example is if you have one of the tank units, I can't remember who it is. Off the top of my head, I don't remember the unit, but it's a triangle, okay? And I think they're out of Fort Hood, Texas, or something like that. It's been a long time since I studied it. But essentially, and I was never in a tank unit, so not really my forte. I'm combat arms, but not like in a Bradley or something. So anyways, long story short, they would get ambushed, and the insurgents knew that if it was the triangle, that this particular unit would not turn around and fight back, but would continue to drive away or something like that. And I might be actually telling the story slightly off, but it's a valid point anyways. If you take the salient points and you forget about the unit designations that I'm talking about, it makes sense. So the insurgents had learned these patterns and recognized that certain units would, when they were ambushed, they wouldn't actually turn around and fight back and kill them. So they could get a vehicle knocked out here and there, they could take out a piece of the convoy, and they would, what they would consider a successful ambush. So they then quickly found out there was a couple units you couldn't do that to without getting hurt. So, for example, the 82nd Airborne, which is a long-standing, well-skilled, well-oiled combat unit, when they got ambushed, they turned around and fought back. And they basically went through the ambush. They didn't run. They didn't continue to drive away. They went head-on-head with the insurgents, and that caused some casualties on the insurgent side. So we talk more about ambushes again in another video, or at least I do. However, but that's a valid story if you sort of apply it to being attacked in an ambush, which is what a kidnapping tends to be. A kidnapping isn't, hey, hi, I'm Bob. I'm gonna go ahead and kidnap you now. It's an ambush, right? So the person's not really paying attention. They don't recognize that somebody's behind them. And a lot of people fail to understand the difference between action and inaction, right? So action always beats inaction, always. If you're not doing anything and somebody then just cold cocks you, throws a haymaker, right, an ambush punch as you start to get in each other's face, you're gonna get clocked. If you're not prepared for it, even with a flinch response, good chance you're just gonna get nailed and knocked right to the ground. And there's, I go into this in other areas. It's important to understand that you do want to be able to respond back to that. You don't want to be out of the fight. That's why when you're attacked, if someone tries to take you to another location, I was talking about this with one of my students. His name's Hal, great guy. And Hal had said that one thing that triggers for him is that he never wants to be moved to another location. And I think that's fantastic advice. If you're moved to another location, then you have opportunity to do the things that you're going to do if you're a bad guy. And so what you don't want to do is give them the opportunity. And so this poor young girl who got kidnapped, to circle back around to that, she didn't realize in the very beginning, had she been paying attention to her surrounding, had she been in code yellow, code orange, go watch the video on the color code of awareness, that'll help you out if you're not familiar with that. Had she been there, she would have had a better chance of survival or mitigating, if you will, that particular circumstance to where it never even escalated into a kidnapping, because she'd be like, whoa, crazy dude on bike, which frankly stands out, especially over the course of a month to 2 months where this person is constantly popping up in your radar. If you see that and it's not putting a red flag up, if it's not putting a blip on your radar, then man, you're in code white. You are completely in the wrong condition. Condition white, condition yellow, condition orange, condition red, condition black. Right? Go look it up. Go read reports on it, or go watch the videos that I've done, or video that I've done. So my point about all this is that if you're not contemplating these kind of things, if you're not thinking about these kind of things, then you will never be able to meet action, because your brain will get overwhelmed when action happens to you. And so from a theoretical standpoint, from a commentary standpoint, I'm trying to get you to think about these things. So when you're watching things on TV, if you happen to watch the kind of stuff that I do, ask yourself, what's the salient point that you should learn from the story about this particular young girl being followed by a crazy dude on a bike? Well, that should have got her thinking. She should have been paying attention to her surrounding early on, because it's better to find out about a potential threat when it's 20 feet, 100 feet, 40 feet, whatever away, than it is to find out about a threat when it's like a foot from you and someone's about to throw a punch at you or throw you into the back of a van and drag your ass to another location, right? So the key here is be aware, be mindful, be thinking, and more importantly, once you discover there might be a threat, act. Be the first to act. Be the first to ambush. Get my point? Because ambushes are hard to survive. So what you do is you beat action with action. You eliminate the possibility of someone taking action against you by being aware, by being cognitive, by looking for furtive behavioral cues, by paying attention to behaviors, by understanding that there's a lot more to a fight before you ever get into the micro skills that you learn in punching and grappling and immobilizations. These things are all important. You want to have a good key understanding of them. You want to be able to play that chess, but you want to play the game as if you're playing the game long before the game ever takes place. Now that means using your head, using your intellect by an act of your volition, pay attention by choice, and then choose to do something before anybody has a chance. That's part of what First Strike is about. Remember, First Strike is a strike that you take before somebody has a chance to hurt you. It's preemptive or preventative, as the case may be. Go read about it. In the U.S. military, first strike simply means a first strike attack in the nuclear sense. That is, if we're going against someone like Russia, who has a lot of nukes, and we have a lot of nukes, if we think they're going to fire a nuke, we strike them first, so they have a diminished capacity to strike us back. That's where that comes from, the term first strike. But really, it's nothing more than preventative war or preemptive war. Okay? Go read Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu says, you want to win? Attack the strategy of your opponent. And that's what you're doing. By being aware, by taking action first, by being the one to go, hey, I see you. Why are you following me? Right? Think about this. If you're walking down the street and you get a feeling somebody's following you, your gut, right? Check your gut. Trust your gut. Always trust your gut. And you turn around and you look at that person and you go, hey, and the person goes like this, and they get startled. That's something you should be paying attention to, right? You should say to yourself, well, that's not good, because he recognizes that I now recognize him. And you should immediately be going, hey, what the F, dude? Why are you following me? Okay? If you see an event like that, if you figure that something is happening like that, if you're standing in a line at a grocery store, especially if you're a woman, and a guy sort of bumps up into you and sort of touches you, lets his body bump into you, he might be testing your awareness. He might be testing whether or not you're going to respond to that particular stimulus. Now, what are we taught in society? Be polite, be nice. Don't do anything, right? Don't say anything to anybody. Don't cause a fight. Screw that. Somebody is getting in your space. If somebody is doing something that your gut check says this isn't right, deal with it right then. Action beats inaction. And before they get a chance to act against you, you act against them. That doesn't mean you have to clock them. Doesn't mean you have to draw your firearm. Doesn't mean you have to slash their neck. But you do want to have some kind of plan so that you're dealing with them before they take action against you. Really important. Think about it.